Valve today announced its new Steam Deck OLED, and that brings with it some changes to the fan solution, the heatsink, the battery, and also the screen. And additionally, Valve is launching alongside the Steam Deck OLED its limited edition translucent and red Steam Deck OLED. The new deck is a major revision and refresh and brings with it some price drops for remaining first-gen LCD decks. We don't have the Steam Deck OLED right now, but it's arriving today and will immediately set to work on in-depth thermal, acoustics, and battery testing alongside other tests. However, we do have the full news for you now with spec changes, and we had a discussion with Valve and got some information from its engineers about some of the changes that they've made that'll set the stage for this. And some of them are pretty interesting, especially for the fan and thermal solution. The release date for the new deck is November 16th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, at which point Valve's website will change the available options. The 256GB LCD model will remain and will be $400. The deck OLED will arrive in the form of a $550 512GB model and a $650 1TB model with Valve's anti-glare etched glass on the latter. There will also be this $680 1TB limited edition. Valve also says remaining supplies of the 64GB LCD and 512GB LCD will see price drops. We're not sure if those are effective as of this post going live or later, and it also noted that these two models will be discontinued. The deck OLED has also gone through a node shrink with its AMD APU. It's overall more or less the same AMD solution. However, it should have some power efficiency improvements as a result of the process change to 6nm. We have more details on that. We also have some of the finer details on the fan changes and some discussion we had with Valve's team. So let's get started. Before that, this video is brought to you by Lexar Thor Memory. Lexar's new Thor DDR5 and DDR4 RAM includes a heavy-duty aluminum heat spreader while retaining a relatively low profile form factor for PCs with tighter air cooler clearance. The Lexar Thor memory supports both Expo and Intel XMP timings and is available from DDR5 5600 to DDR5 6000 CL32. Learn more at the link in the description below. In discussing this launch with Valve's team, they noted this isn't the Steam Deck 2, but a Steam Deck OLED, and they're sort of retconning the original to be called the Steam Deck LCD just to add some clarity. Valve is working on a Steam Deck 2, but it told us that that's at least a few years out. It's something that it's looking at, but they want to see some new APUs or somewhere they can overhaul the core technology before moving on something like a Deck 2. This, however, is a major refresh, and it makes some critical changes, especially seeing as the Deck was Valve's first attempt at this type of hardware, and so they had some things they could improve on. The core specs are mostly familiar, but there are some key changes that improve power efficiency, screen quality, and theoretically might improve the acoustics and the thermals. And we'll be looking at all of that in our testing very soon. In the meantime, we'll start with the heatsink, battery, and the fan. Moving to an OLED screen brings with it some unique advantages. The first of which is that the OLED is physically smaller, not the screen size exposed to the user. That's actually improved, but rather the depth of it, basically the package size of the screen. And that means more room inside of the chassis for the deck, which hasn't changed externally, to accommodate other components. So in addition to some reduction in weight from the screen change, despite increasing the battery capacity, the other benefit of moving to OLED is power savings, where OLED, when it's on black, can just toggle the pixels and save some power, plus other power savings just from a technological change. This is what the original internals looked like. Valve has now increased the battery capacity from 40 watt hours to 50 watt hours by utilizing what used to be space occupied by the display. Valve has also changed the heatsink and the fan that you're seeing in our original here, moving to a 14% thicker impeller and 15% thicker fan body, but maintaining the same fan diameter. We estimate that these changes may help with acoustics by providing a stiffening effect on the fan. And we'll test that in our anechoic chamber, which we didn't have last time we reviewed a Steam Deck. The old heatsink also saw a change, so the individual fins in the fin stack have increased in thickness by 12%, which provides some more mass. The old heat pipe has also been changed, now with a size increase. Valve didn't have the exact diameter when we spoke with part of their team yesterday. Again, we'll test to confirm all this, so wait for our review, and you'll have about a week or so before it goes live for purchase anyway. But the theory is that these changes specifically to the fan and to the fin stack should allow for a more basically prolonged or drawn out hysteresis, where the fan ramp and deramp should be less noticeable. The fan shouldn't need to spin quite as early, and hopefully if they've adjusted some of the fan curve, it won't do that peaking behavior, the peaks and valleys, where you hear an audible change in the fan RPM. So those are potential upsides for these changes, and that behavior is actually something we explicitly noticed in our original acoustics testing of the Steam Deck. Battery life has improved in a few ways with this model. First of all, there's the change in the battery capacity itself, but in addition to moving to 50 watt hours, it also benefits from savings across the platform. AMD is still the APU supplier, and Valve provided the spec sheet. The APU combines a Zen 2 4-core 8-thread CPU and an 8-CU RDNA 2 GPU. And if that sounds familiar, that's because it's the exact same spec as the original Steam Deck APU. Clocks are also the same. And speaking with Valve, the company said that there shouldn't be a change to gaming performance. It doesn't expect one. However, Valve says that the die shrink to 6 nanometers will result in an efficiency bump. That said, there are some spec changes that could result in performance improvements in certain conditions. The memory has been changed from an LPDDR5 5500 solution to an LPDDR5 6400 solution, as marked in Valve's own spec sheet that we're showing you here. Capacity and channeling are the same, but there was a speed increase. Between the process change, the battery change, and the screen change, Valve says in total it expects a 30 to 50% increase in battery life depending on the gaming conditions. Valve's new spec sheet is marketing what it says is 3 to 12 hours of gameplay. Its original spec sheet, as a reminder, marketed 2 to 8 hours for the LCD model. And that range is so wide because it depends on the type of game you're playing, or if you're just watching media, or if your frame rate capped. Valve also noted faster charging times. This is something we tested in our Ally non-extreme review recently. It tells us that the new Deck OLED will charge from 20% to 80% in 45 minutes. We'll validate these claims in our testing, of course, and as a reminder, charging too fast can cause adverse effects on the battery's life long term, or its overall endurance. Finally, the charging cable length has increased to 2.5 meters from 1.5 meter previously. The charger spec, though, is the same otherwise. So let's go over the display now. First, the spec sheet from Valve. Valve's new display retains the 1280 by 800 resolution, but moves to a larger size with a reduced bevel and a 7.4-inch diagonal screen. The prior display was 7 inches diagonally. The chassis is the same, so the difference in that extra 0.4-inch diagonal size is from the bezel. The display is also HDR capable. Valve said that this was the, quote, first handheld with HDR OLED, but then it qualified it by saying, quote, that we could find, so fair enough. The spec is 1000 nits peak brightness with HDR, 600 nits with SDR, 110% P3 color gamut, and the display moves to a 90 Hz solution from 60 Hz with an advertised 0.1 millisecond response time. This positions Valve to more directly compete with the ASUS ROG Ally. Valve's new OLED touchscreen has also changed the polling rate, so it's on a 180 Hz polling rate, which should noticeably improve the scrolling speed, the touch responsiveness, typing responsiveness, and general touch input behavior. Now, this will be a question, so to get ahead of it, Valve says, no, you will not be able to swap the OLED screen onto the existing Steam Deck models. Whether or not a third party could be built to do that, we're not sure, but Valve says a straight-up swap from A to B won't be possible. And before moving into repairability topics, the weight of the device has come down a little bit, so it's dropped to 640 grams from 669 grams advertised weight between the two models. Depends on the specific spec configuration you have, but the reduction is from the screen change despite a battery capacity increase. The next topic covers controls, input changes, and repairability. So Valve is moving to Torx machine screws, as we understand it, everywhere in the body of the chassis for the new Steam Deck, or at least everywhere the user's accessing. It will have metal screw bosses on the receiving end of this. Both of these combined should reduce accidental stripping of the screws, especially because Valve wants to continue to improve on repairability. This was a strong point of the Steam Deck when Valve launched it, maybe partially intentionally and partially just by nature of the design they went with. But companies like iFixit and other third parties have provided materials to make it easy to repair or replace components within a Steam Deck. And moving to things, small detail like adding metal bosses to try and prevent stripping within the plastic housing, for example, that's a big and important change, because if you're going to encourage end users to open up their devices, modify them, change out the chassis, whatever, make it basically like a project, not just a gaming console, then putting some user protection in there is good too, to make sure they don't accidentally screw it up. So that's a good change to see. Now, the thumbsticks will also be changed to use a new material with a grippier surface. Valve says this is a response to feedback from its community. Valve will also be moving the bumper onto the same daughter board as the thumbstick, although they will be externally positioned in the same place. This change should improve bumper strength, particularly in a drop. Valve redesigned its touchpad and has rebranded it as HD Haptics. The company said that it should be more precise as a result. You're seeing the old touchpad now. Despite not being interchangeable, Valve also said that the display is now easier to replace. Apparently, you don't have to take off the back casing to replace the display. And as for the battery, that still uses adhesive, and the SD card still remains in the somewhat accident-prone location. We've actually, I didn't know this was the model I brought in here. You can see we've actually marked ours, so if there's ever any disassembly on it, there are no accidental snaps of SD cards. So that remains the same. They weren't able to rework that because they're trying to keep the exterior chassis the same, which brings us to another point. All prior accessories, at least as far as the chassis go, should remain compatible with the Steam Deck. Valve said this with a good amount of certainty, although of course they're not the creator of those third-party solutions, but things like translucent cases from JSAUX or similar, those should still be a like-for-like swap, because although the interior has changed, the exterior shell remains the same, or at least the same enough. And we'll check on the specifics of that once we have our unit here. So there were also some changes to connectivity. Bluetooth, for example, has been updated to 5.3. They said there have been changes to some audio codecs, and then Wi-Fi has a move going from Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6E. Now, for internet speed, if your ISP can accommodate it, this should improve downloading speed, especially via Steam, which has pretty fast servers for game downloads. And Valve noted a significant download speed increase. They claimed 2 to 3x. That has a lot of asterisks attached to it, most of them relating to your ISP. But Valve says that a lot of this can be due to reduced congestion on the 6 gigahertz band, plus just the increased capabilities of Wi-Fi 6E in general. Additionally, Valve's new module will reduce crosstalk between Bluetooth and Wi-Fi when the unit is docked. A few final notes on software. So Valve told us it's still working on getting a version of its SteamOS available as a general install, which would allow you to put it on devices like an Ally, for example, or just any device in general. So still working on that. They also made some changes in the interim to the software to accommodate the 90 hertz refresh rate, and worked on a frame limiter slider and added HDR support and software for the new screen. As for Valve's limited edition variation of the deck, that is functionally equivalent in all ways to the high-end model of the Deck OLED, but it has a cosmetic change. It has a translucent body with red accents on the mesh, some of the buttons, and the thumbsticks. Valve says that this is an experimental run mixing its supply chains, so for logistical reasons, they're limiting the production. If it sees this as successful, and let's be real, it'll probably sell out immediately, but Valve says it will explore more concepts like this for future models, future Steam Decks, based on the response to it. That covers it for now, though. We're getting our unit in a little bit later than some other media, but it's arriving today as of the video going live and filming it, actually. And we intend to turn it around very fast. I'll be pulling at least one all-nighter to get the testing done. We're looking at thermals, acoustics, and power in depth. You'll want to check back for all of that. And additionally, we've published this video in article format early on the website. So gamersnexus.net, we just recently refreshed it, relaunched it. It's super fast and it's ad-free. The article is going to be going up about 10 minutes after the video goes live. So check gamersnexus.net if you want the written version of it, or just share it with people who might be video averse. If you want the ad-free, ultra-fast experience that the website can provide, and consider supporting us on store.gamersnexus.net to help fund our fast turnaround and efforts on both the site and in video, or patreon.com/gamersnexus to throw a few bucks our way for reporting. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more and for the follow-up testing. We'll see you all next time.